Between 1942 and 1945, over 400,000 German prisoners of war were shipped to American shores. Among them were 3 admirals and 40 generals, men who had commanded armies, led divisions, and shaped the course of World War II. What happened next would shock them more than any battle they had fought. The Geneva Convention of 1929 required the United States to provide living quarters comparable to those of its own military. For the highest-ranking German officers, this meant something unprecedented. In Mississippi, at Camp Clinton and Camp Shelby, each German general received his own bungalow, complete with a garden. While their men fought and died across Europe, these generals found themselves in what would become known as the Golden Cage. You have to understand, these men expected harsh treatment. They expected revenge. Instead, they got something they never could have imagined: hospitality. As millions of American men shipped overseas, farms across the nation faced a critical labor shortage. The solution was controversial: put enemy prisoners to work in the heartland of America. Farmers paid the government 40 cents an hour per prisoner. The POWs themselves received 80 cents a day, enough for cigarettes, candy, and beer in the camp canteen. They picked cotton and peaches, harvested wheat, cut timber, and built fences. I was just a kid then. These German soldiers would come to our farm in Murdoch, Nebraska. They played games with us, brought us candy and gum. They were the enemy, of course, but at that age, you don't know enough to be afraid. But something else was happening, something that defied the rules of war. Farmers began inviting these enemy soldiers into their homes. Paul Roller, a Virginia farmer, arranged to rent 4 German POWs with no guards. His only responsibilities: pick them up at 8 a.m., care for them through the day, and return them by 4 p.m. After a day spent cutting corn, Paul Roller and his wife provided dinner for these German soldiers. This was happening across America, from Kansas to Minnesota, from Nebraska to Virginia. Keith Buss, age 78, for POWs arrived at our Kansas farm in 1943. They were stone masons. They built us a concrete garage, no level, just nail and string to line the building up. It's still standing today. Perhaps no story captures this extraordinary moment in history better than Christmas at the Camlin family farm. When Christmas came, Cecil Camlin's mother cooked up a feast and invited the German POWs to share it. By the end of the night, the enemy soldiers were gathered around the piano, singing Christmas carols, while the Camlin family listened and sang along. I never forgot that night. These were supposed to be the enemy, but sitting there in our living room, singing carols, they were just young men, far from home. For the German generals, the disconnect was even more profound. Men who had dined with Hitler now found themselves eating better in captivity than they had in their own cold water flats back in Germany. One former POW, Hans Wecker, who later became a physician in Maine, remembered it clearly. When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years as an American POW, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes. The prisoners ate the same rations as American soldiers, including wine for general officers and special meals for Thanksgiving and Christmas. They had access to sports, theater, chess games, and books. They received daily rations of cigarettes and meat, both rationed for American civilians. Many prisoners found that their living conditions as prisoners were better than as civilians in Germany. One thing I remember with a smile is that we were allowed to go swim in a nearby lake. The interaction between enemy combatants and American families created something unexpected: friendships that transcended war. I delivered milk to a Kansas camp. I talked to several of them. I thought they were very nice people. Many farmers were of German ancestry themselves. They spoke the language. They saw these soldiers not as Nazis, but as young men, the same age as their own sons fighting overseas. After the war ended, a German pastor who had welcomed POWs to his church sent care packages with food and sweets to Germany. Some farmers tried to lure former prisoners back, promising farms and even offering their daughters in marriage. An estimated 5,000 German POWs returned to the United States after the war and became American citizens. The concrete garages they built still stand. The memories remain. At first, There was apprehension. People thought of the POWs as Nazis, but half of the prisoners had no inclination to sympathize with the Nazi Party. Fewer than 10% were hardcore ideologues. For the German generals who sat in their bungalows at Camp Clinton and Camp Shelby, watching American farmers extend friendship to enemy soldiers, it must have seemed impossible. They had been taught to expect the worst from their captors. Instead, they discovered something that war couldn't erase: basic human decency. In the end, the story of German POWs in America isn't just about war and captivity. It's about the moment when enemies became guests at the dinner table, when soldiers became stonemasons, when Christmas carols bridged the gap between nations at war. The generals were right to be in disbelief. What happened on American soil during World War II defied everything they knew about war. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. Between 1942 and 1945, over 400,000 German prisoners of war were held in approximately 700 camps across the United States. The vast majority returned to Germany after the war, but approximately 5,000 became American citizens.